She stood frozen, her tray trembling, as the billionaire's deaf mother stared at her with unblinking eyes. The restaurant had gone silent, every whisper swallowed by the weight of that moment. Naomi's hands moved before her fear could stop them. She began to sign. One word. Then another. And when Evelyn Moreau understood, her face broke open in a soundless cry that stopped the entire room cold. Some moments don't need words, they speak straight to the soul. Hey everyone, welcome to today's story. You're about to witness an emotional journey that proves love and connection can bloom even in silence. Before we dive in, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from right now? Type your city or country down in the comments. I really want to see how far this story travels. And if you believe that kindness can change someone's life, please hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel and lets me know you're ready for this heart-touching story. The hum of evening in Manhattan felt like a pulse, horns, footsteps, and chatter all melting into the rhythm of the city that never slept. Inside the Orchid, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, crystal chandeliers spilled light over marble floors. Laughter floated from tables where power and money dined, but in the corners, where no one looked twice, stood Naomi Carter, apron crisp, back straight, heart pounding. Naomi had learned long ago that being invisible was safer than being seen. She moved like clockwork, smile, serve, vanish. Her brown eyes carried the quiet fatigue of someone who'd spent years apologizing for taking up space. Naomi, table 4's complaining about the temperature of their wine, her manager snapped. She nodded quickly. I'll handle it. Her voice was soft, cautious, trained never to push back. She fixed the problem without fuss, offering the guest an apologetic smile that wasn't returned. When she turned away, her reflection caught in the glass, a young woman in her late 20s, skin like warm mahogany, hair pulled tight, shoulders always slightly tense. She looked like someone constantly bracing for rejection. After closing hours, she sat in the staff locker room, scrolling through her phone, avoiding the laughter of her co-workers. Her thumb paused over a photo of her grandmother, smiling, hands mid-motion in American Sign Language. The caption she'd written months ago read, "You heard me when no one else did." Naomi smiled faintly, then whispered, "I miss you, Grandma." She had learned ASL for her grandmother when she was only 10. After her passing, Naomi never used it again. It was a part of her that felt lost in the noise of survival. Outside, the winter wind bit through her thin coat as she walked home to her small apartment in the Bronx. The heater wheezed, the walls were thin, but the silence felt like peace after the constant buzz of serving others. She sat on her bed, pulling out a notebook filled with doodles of hand-signing letters. Her dream was once to be an interpreter for the hearing impaired, but dreams, she had decided, didn't pay rent. The next morning, across the city, the sound of a piano drifted faintly through the halls of a penthouse overlooking Central Park. The melody faltered, then stopped. Evelyn Moreau lifted her hands from the keys, her expression unreadable. Her hearing aids lay untouched on the table beside her. Once, she had been the heartbeat of music, an acclaimed pianist whose performances brought people to tears. Now, she lived in a quiet cocoon. The world outside was vibrant, but to her, it existed in soft, distant silence. Her son, Julian Moreau, entered the room, suit immaculate, expression as controlled as his posture. "Mother," he mouthed clearly, making sure she could read his lips. "We have dinner reservations tonight. The Orchid. It'll be good for you to get out." Evelyn's gaze softened briefly. She touched his face affectionately before signing, "You always work too much." He smiled faintly, replying in sign, "And you never leave this house." She looked away, her fingers trembling as she signed, "The world feels loud. Even when I can't hear it." Julian exhaled slowly. "You'll be fine," he mouthed. "I'll be with you." Later that evening, the Orchid shimmered under golden light as chauffeurs helped women in gowns and men in tuxedos through the door. Naomi felt her nerves spike when her manager called out, "Table 12, Mrs. Evelyn Moreau and her son. Make sure everything's perfect." She froze. The name sounded familiar. Rumors whispered in the kitchen about the billionaire CEO who booked months in advance, about his mysterious mother who rarely appeared in public. Naomi smoothed her apron and whispered, "Just another customer. Just another night." She carried the menus to their table, her palms slightly damp. Julian looked up first, his eyes cool but polite. Evelyn sat beside him, elegant in a cream shawl, her hair silver and perfectly pinned. There was a softness about her face, a grace that age and loss had not erased. Naomi began her practiced greeting, "Good evening. Welcome to the Orchid. My name is..." She stopped. Evelyn wasn't looking at her. She was staring at the menu, motionless. Naomi waited, unsure what to do. Julian leaned toward his mother and signed something. Evelyn nodded and smiled faintly. Naomi blinked, realization dawning, she's deaf. Her heart squeezed unexpectedly. She knew what that isolation felt like, that small ache of being left out of a conversation. The rest of the night passed in quiet observation. Evelyn and Julian communicated with soft gestures, fluid movements of their hands, while the others at the table spoke awkwardly, occasionally raising their voices unnecessarily, as if volume could bridge silence. Naomi moved between tables efficiently, but her eyes kept drifting to Evelyn. There was something about her, the serenity, the distance, that stirred something inside Naomi. She caught fragments of Julian's sign language and found herself translating unconsciously, smiling at the familiarity of it. When the group left, Evelyn turned briefly and looked at Naomi. Just for a second. A nod. A polite acknowledgement. Yet it sent a strange warmth through Naomi's chest, a reminder of connection long forgotten. Later, Naomi stayed late cleaning up. She replayed that small moment in her mind, Evelyn's eyes, the soft dignity in her movements. As she wiped down the table, she found a napkin with faint lipstick marks and a single word written in elegant handwriting, "Thank you." She traced the letters with her thumb, smiling. She didn't know that this was only the beginning, that her small act of kindness and curiosity would soon upend everything she thought she knew about silence, about class, about love. But for now, in the echo of the restaurant's closing hours, Naomi allowed herself to dream, just a little. What if connection didn't need permission? What if kindness was the only language that mattered? The following Friday, the Orchid buzzed louder than usual. The owner had announced the arrival of high-profile guests, and everyone was on edge. Naomi tied her apron tighter, hoping not to be noticed. She didn't like attention, it always led to trouble. When the list of table assignments came out, her heart skipped. Table 12, Mrs. Evelyn Moreau. The same woman. The one with the quiet grace and the thank you napkin. Naomi swallowed hard. "Why me again?" she whispered. Her coworker smirked. "Because you're the polite one. And she's rich enough to complain about the way water looks." Naomi exhaled softly, muttering, "Just do your job, Naomi. Nothing special." As the evening began, the restaurant gleamed like a crystal jewel. The chandeliers sparkled, violins hummed faintly in the background, and the scent of truffle oil lingered in the air. At exactly 7:30, Evelyn Moreau entered. She moved slowly, her posture regal but fragile. Julian followed beside her, phone in one hand, his other gently guiding her elbow. They were joined by 2 board members from his company, loud, entitled men who didn't know how to soften their tone for a woman who couldn't hear. Naomi felt a pang of discomfort watching Evelyn smile politely, pretending not to notice the pity in their eyes. "Here we go," Naomi whispered under her breath, straightening her tray. She approached the table carefully, forcing her nerves to stay still. "Good evening," she said, voice gentle, respectful. Julian nodded slightly, acknowledging her, while Evelyn kept her focus on the napkin before her. Naomi began pouring water for each guest. "Mrs. Moreau, would you like still or sparkling?" she asked. Evelyn didn't respond. One of the men chuckled, a low, condescending sound. "She can't hear you, honey." Naomi froze. Her chest tightened. She looked at Evelyn again, seeing not rudeness, but isolation. The kind that made the air around a person heavy. Naomi glanced at Julian, who had begun to sign something to his mother, his movements efficient, slightly stiff. Naomi hesitated only a second before her instincts took over. Her hands moved before her brain caught up. She signed softly, "Would you like some tea?" Evelyn's head lifted. Her eyes widened. Then her lips parted in shock, followed by a faint, trembling smile. Naomi's breath hitched. She hadn't meant to, hadn't even realized she remembered the signs so clearly. But now, the older woman's entire face was glowing. Evelyn signed back, slowly, "Yes, please." "Jasmine, if you have it." Naomi's smile bloomed like sunlight after rain. She nodded, hands still moving in small, careful gestures. "We do. It's my favorite, too." The two businessmen fell silent, unsure what they were witnessing. Julian looked between them, his expression shifting from surprise to something softer, admiration, curiosity, maybe even gratitude. For a few long moments, the restaurant felt suspended in time. The violinist's bow slowed, waiters froze mid-step, and every pair of eyes turned toward the woman in pearls and the waitress in black uniform silently conversing like long-lost friends. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she signed, "You sign beautifully." "How did you learn?" Naomi blinked back sudden emotion. "My grandmother was deaf. I learned for her. She passed away a few years ago." Evelyn's eyes glistened. She reached out and lightly touched Naomi's hand, a delicate gesture of connection. "She must have been proud of you." Naomi couldn't speak. She nodded once, throat tight. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. One of the guests shifted awkwardly, muttering, "Well, that's something." Julian shot him a look that silenced him instantly. For the rest of the meal, Naomi and Evelyn exchanged occasional signs, tiny, wordless moments that bridged decades, status, and silence. Naomi explained dishes through signing, Evelyn asked simple questions about the flavors, the textures. And for the first time in years, Evelyn laughed. Not audibly, but her shoulders shook, her face alive with light. Julian leaned back in his chair, eyes glistening, watching his mother come alive. When Naomi walked away to retrieve dessert, she could feel her co-workers staring. One whispered, "What was that?" "You know sign language." Naomi shrugged, cheeks flushed. "Just a little." Another waitress smirked. "You should be careful. Don't overdo it. Some rich people don't like being reminded they need help." Naomi bit her lip, nodding, but her mind was far away, still with Evelyn's trembling hands and that radiant, wordless laugh. When she returned to the table with dessert, lavender creme brulee, Evelyn smiled the moment she saw her. She signed, "Thank you for seeing me." Naomi's vision blurred for a second. She blinked fast, forcing the tears away. "You're welcome," she signed back. "Always." After the dinner, as the guests stood to leave, Evelyn paused, her hand resting on Naomi's arm. She signed one last thing, slowly, deliberately, "You remind me that silence isn't empty. It's full of what we choose to feel." Naomi's chest tightened. She managed a trembling smile, nodding in acknowledgement. Julian slipped a card onto the table, nothing personal, just a formality, but his eyes lingered on her face as he mouthed a simple, "Thank you." When they left, Naomi stood alone at the table, staring after them. The glow of that connection lingered, wrapping around her like warmth in a cold room. But as the whispers began again, staff gossiping about the waitress who put on a show for the Moreaus, the warmth began to fade. Still, as Naomi finished her shift, wiping the same table where Evelyn had sat, she found herself smiling again. It had been only a few moments, a few signs, but somehow she felt more heard that night than in all her years of speaking. As she clocked out, the city lights shimmered beyond the windows like 1,000 eyes watching her, and she whispered, "Maybe kindness really does echo." Naomi woke the next morning to the sound of rain tapping gently against her window. Her small apartment was quiet except for the hiss of the heater and the muffled city outside. She sat on the edge of her bed, rubbing her eyes, the events of last night playing like a movie in her mind, Evelyn's kind eyes, the warmth in her hands, the soundless laugh that had filled the restaurant. It felt unreal, like something fragile she might have imagined. She shook her head. It was just one moment, she whispered. Don't make it more than it is. At work that evening, she tried to blend into routine, but whispers followed her like shadows. There's the star of the show, one of the waitresses teased. The Moreaus asked for her name. Maybe she'll get a mansion next. The others laughed. Naomi smiled weakly, pretending not to care, though embarrassment flushed her cheeks. The manager pulled her aside. The Moreaus people called this afternoon, he said. Mrs. Moreau requested you personally for their next visit. Naomi blinked. She what? You heard me, he said, studying her. Don't mess it up. They're our top clients. He walked off, leaving her heart pounding. Requested her? Naomi didn't know whether to be honored or terrified. The memory of Evelyn's signing came back, the softness in her hands, the sincerity in her eyes. But with it came the sting of those mocking voices and the fear that maybe she had crossed a line. Maybe she had been too forward, too visible. Later that night, Julian sat in his office at Moreau Industries, staring out over the rain-streaked city. His mother hadn't stopped smiling since the dinner. He'd seen something in her that night he hadn't seen in years, life. Real joy. And it had come from a waitress. He couldn't stop thinking about that woman, Naomi. There was something about her quiet bravery, her gentleness. But another voice in his mind warned him to stay detached. The world he lived in didn't forgive sentimentality. And his mother's happiness, though fragile, needed stability, not emotional complications. Meanwhile, Evelyn sat in her dimly lit music room, tracing her fingers along the piano keys. The vibrations thrummed faintly under her touch, a ghost of what used to be. She thought of Naomi, the way her hands moved, the sincerity in her eyes when she signed. For the first time in years, she wanted to reach out, to speak without fear of misunderstanding. She signed slowly to herself, "She heard me." 2 days later, Naomi walked into the restaurant, already dreading her shift. Her manager intercepted her immediately. "You're at table 12 again," he said curtly. "Mrs. Moreau's back." Naomi's pulse quickened. "Already? Apparently she liked you." "Smile, and keep it professional." Naomi straightened her uniform, forcing her nerves into submission. When she reached the table, Evelyn was already there, sitting alone this time. Julian was late. Naomi hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. Evelyn looked up and smiled instantly. She signed, "I hoped you'd come." Naomi's chest tightened. "I didn't know you'd ask for me," she signed shyly. "You're the only one who looks at me instead of around me," Evelyn replied, her movements graceful and deliberate. Naomi's throat thickened. She laughed softly, a little nervous, then poured Evelyn's tea. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence. Naomi took orders, refilled glasses, exchanged small signs when she passed. But she could feel eyes on her, the managers, the hostesses, curious customers. They saw a waitress signing with a billionaire's mother and didn't know whether to admire or mock. Julian arrived midway through dinner, apologetic but composed. "Sorry I'm late," he mouthed. Evelyn waved him off and gestured toward Naomi, signing quickly. Julian followed her hands, his brow lifting slightly. "You've made quite an impression," he said to Naomi, voice low. "My mother doesn't ask for anyone twice." Naomi blushed. "She's easy to talk to." "You sign," he noted, watching her carefully. "That's rare." "My grandmother taught me," she said softly. "I forgot most of it. Until now." "You didn't look like you forgot much." There was something kind in his tone, genuine, maybe even gentle, but Naomi stiffened. "It's just my job, sir." He nodded, his face unreadable again. "Of course." When the night ended, Evelyn signed a heartfelt goodbye, her hands lingering over Naomi's. Julian watched quietly. As Naomi turned to leave, Evelyn caught her hand one last time, signing, "Next week." Naomi hesitated, then nodded. That night, she lay awake replaying everything. A part of her felt alive again, seen again. But another part whispered fear. People like her didn't belong in their world. She'd seen what happened when the rich took notice of the poor. It was a spotlight that burned. At breakfast the next morning, Evelyn told Julian she wanted Naomi to visit her home, to help her practice conversation, to teach her new signs. Julian frowned. "Mother, she's a restaurant employee. You don't even know her." Evelyn signed sharply. "I know kindness when I see it." "You don't know her story," he countered. "And you don't know hers," she replied, eyes fierce. Julian exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Fine. Invite her." Naomi almost said no when she received the message. A driver? A private mansion? It all felt wrong. But something in her heart whispered yes, the same voice that told her to sign that night at the restaurant. So, trembling, she agreed. The following week, she stood at the gates of the Moreau estate, clutching her coat tightly. Her breath fogged in the cold morning air. The gates opened, and a driver ushered her in. The house loomed like a dream, tall windows, ivy on the walls, gardens blooming despite the season. Evelyn greeted her warmly at the door, signing, "Welcome, my dear." Inside, the silence wasn't heavy like Naomi expected, it was peaceful. Evelyn led her to a sunlit room filled with sheet music, paintings, and a piano. They began slowly, signing words and phrases. Naomi corrected Evelyn's movements gently. Evelyn teased her with mock seriousness. They laughed, a soundless, beautiful exchange that felt like healing. But as the hours passed, Naomi felt something else stirring, an awareness of Julian watching from the doorway, leaning against the frame, his expression soft. When their eyes met, she looked away quickly. He smiled faintly but said nothing. That night, Naomi returned home feeling both exhilarated and terrified. Something inside her was changing. The quiet bond she shared with Evelyn felt sacred, but the way Julian looked at her, like she was something precious, was dangerous. She couldn't afford dreams that didn't fit her life. Still, as she lay in bed, the memory of Evelyn's laughter and Julian's unspoken gaze refused to fade. Naomi whispered to the ceiling, "Don't fall, Naomi. You'll break if you do." The rain fell harder than expected that afternoon, pounding the city in sheets. Naomi stood at the bus stop outside the Moreau mansion, umbrella trembling in her grip. The sky had cracked open like a warning. "You'll never make it back to the Bronx in this," Julian said, voice firm but not unkind. He stood just behind her, coat perfectly dry, calm even in the storm's chaos. Naomi turned, flustered. "It's just rain. I'll be fine." "That's not rain," he said with a faint smile, nodding toward the lightning slashing the sky. "That's a flood waiting to happen. I can manage." "Naomi," he said quietly, and there was something in the way he said her name that made her stop. "Let me drive you home." "I don't need, it's not a favor. It's just smart." Evelyn appeared at the door, signing something quickly, her expression worried. Naomi turned toward her and watched her hands. "Please," Evelyn signed. "It's dangerous. Let him take you." Naomi's resistance melted under Evelyn's gentle insistence. "Okay," she murmured, nodding. Julian smiled slightly, relief flickering in his eyes. He opened the car door for her, and she hesitated before slipping inside. The leather seat felt too soft, too expensive. She clutched her bag tightly in her lap as Julian started the engine. The city passed by in a blur of rain and headlights. For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the rhythmic thud of windshield wipers and the hum of tires over wet pavement. Naomi stared out the window, watching her reflection blur with every drop. Julian glanced at her briefly. "You're quiet," he said. She smiled faintly. "That's rare for me." "You're not the type to fill silence just to fill it," he replied. "Most people talk because they can't handle quiet. You listen to it." Naomi tilted her head, caught off guard. "Maybe because I grew up in it." "You mean being alone?" She nodded. Sometimes loneliness becomes so normal you stop noticing it. Julian looked back to the road, his jaw tightening. I know the feeling. The car hit a puddle, and Naomi instinctively grabbed the seat edge. Julian slowed down. You sure you're okay? I'm fine, she said softly. Then, after a pause, you're different from what I expected. What did you expect? Cold. Arrogant. Rich. He chuckled. 2 out of 3 isn't bad. Naomi laughed quietly, the sound genuine and light. Which 2? I'll let you decide, he said, smirking faintly. The storm worsened. Thunder rolled over the skyline, and traffic began to crawl. A warning flashed on the radio, major flooding in parts of the Bronx. We might need to stop somewhere for a bit, Julian said. It's getting bad. I live in the low part of the Bronx, Naomi said, worried. If it floods, we'll wait it out. My building's nearby. You can stay in the lobby until it clears. She hesitated. That's not necessary, Naomi, he said, cutting her off gently. It's one night. You'll be safe there. When they arrived, his penthouse building loomed over the skyline, sleek glass shimmering in the rain. Naomi followed him inside, eyes wide. The marble floors, the golden elevator lights, it all felt unreal. You can wait here, Julian said, gesturing to the living room. There's food in the kitchen. I'll call when it's safe to go. Naomi nodded awkwardly, clutching her bag. Thank you. I'll just sit quietly. You don't have to, he said softly, and something in his tone made her heart flutter. While Julian stepped into another room to take a call, Naomi wandered to the window. The city stretched out like a glowing ocean, rain streaming down the glass. For once, she didn't feel small. She felt suspended. Seen. When Julian returned, she was tracing a raindrop down the windowpane with her fingertip. You ever get tired of this view? She asked. Every day, he said honestly. It's beautiful, but it's lonely. Like looking down on a world you're not part of. That's surprising, she said, turning to face him. Most people would kill for this view. Maybe. But most people think success means belonging. It doesn't. What does? He met her eyes. Moments like that one at the restaurant. When someone actually reaches out. Naomi's breath caught. You saw that? Of course I did, he said softly. You changed something in her that night. I haven't seen her smile like that since I was a kid. Naomi looked away, voice barely a whisper. She changed me too. For a moment, the air between them grew heavy, intimate. Then a flash of lightning illuminated the room. The storm roared louder, breaking the spell. Julian exhaled. I'll make some tea. I can help, Naomi offered. They moved together in the kitchen, an unlikely pair, him in a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled up, her in a soaked uniform. She handed him a mug, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent a strange warmth through her chest. When he handed her tea, he said, My mother thinks you're special. Naomi smiled sadly. Your mother is kind. I'm just a waitress. You're not just anything. She froze, unsure how to respond. He realized his words lingered too long and quickly looked away. I mean, she sees something in you. She doesn't usually let people in. Naomi nodded, eyes down. Neither do I. The clock ticked quietly. Rain softened. Neither of them moved for a long time. When the weather alert finally cleared, Julian offered to drive her again, but she declined. I think I'll walk a bit. Clear my head. In this weather. It's calm now, she said, smiling faintly. Besides, sometimes walking through the quiet helps me listen. To what? He asked. She looked at him for a long moment before answering. To what I really want. Julian didn't stop her. He just watched as she disappeared into the misty night, her figure fading against the glow of streetlights. Back in the car, as she walked home, Naomi replayed every word, every glance. She had felt something tonight, something terrifying and beautiful. But she couldn't let it happen. Their worlds didn't fit. And yet, his voice, his kindness, Evelyn's warmth, they had already slipped past her defenses. She whispered into the night, "Don't let me hope, God. Please don't let me hope." The days that followed were strangely quiet. Naomi returned to the orchid, back to trays and orders and smiles she didn't mean. But something inside her had shifted since that storm. Every sound, every silence, every pair of eyes reminded her of Julian and his mother. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something dangerous enough to make her pulse quicken when she least expected it. A week later, the Moros returned. Evelyn, radiant in cream and pearls, signed something the moment she saw Naomi. "I missed our talks." Naomi's hands hesitated before answering, "I did too." Julian watched from across the table, an unreadable look in his eyes. That night, after dinner, Evelyn asked Naomi to visit the house again, this time, to stay longer. "Mother's been restless," Julian explained quietly. "She doesn't like most of her interpreters." "You calm her." Naomi's throat tightened. "I don't know if I should." Julian smiled faintly. "She asked for you. That's rare. Please." Against her better judgment, Naomi agreed. The following afternoon, she arrived at the Moreau estate again, but this time the visit was different. Evelyn greeted her in a soft grey shawl, her face pale but eyes bright. Julian wasn't home, only the housekeeper and a quiet hush that felt like memory. They spent the first hour practicing signs, Evelyn giggling whenever she fumbled. Then, Naomi noticed the photographs. Framed pictures lined the shelves, young Julian in boarding school, Evelyn beside a man with stern eyes and a polished smile. But one photo drew her in, Evelyn at a piano, her hands on the keys, eyes full of light. Naomi stared for a moment before signing, "You used to play?" Evelyn smiled wistfully. "I did. Until I couldn't hear the notes anymore." She hesitated, hands slowing. "My husband, he didn't like silence. Said it made the house feel dead. When I lost my hearing, he stopped talking to me altogether." Naomi's stomach twisted. That must have been hard. "He left shortly after Julian's 18th birthday," Evelyn signed. "Julian took over everything. The company. The responsibility. My guilt." Naomi frowned. "Your guilt?" Evelyn's eyes grew wet. "Because I couldn't protect him from the world's noise. He learned to speak its language, the cold one. But sometimes, I see the boy he used to be, listening with his heart instead of his head. You bring that out in him." Naomi blinked back tears. "I don't think I do anything special." Evelyn reached for her hand. "You listen differently. That's rare, child. That's love in another language." Naomi didn't know what to say. Her grandmother's face flashed in her mind, her wrinkled smile, her patient hands teaching her to sign. For years, Naomi had blamed herself for the old woman's death. She'd been at work when her grandmother collapsed, too far away to help. Since then, she'd avoided anything that reminded her of the guilt, sign language, deafness, connection. But now, here she was, living inside the echo of that loss. "Sometimes," she whispered, "silence holds everything we're too afraid to say." Evelyn nodded, eyes shining. "Yes. Silence keeps our truths safe until we're brave enough to speak them." Later that evening, Julian came home early. Naomi was seated beside Evelyn, their hands moving like dancers in midair. He paused in the doorway, watching them. A rare softness crossed his face, a mix of nostalgia and awe. "She's better when you're here," he said quietly. Naomi turned, startled. "She's amazing all on her own." Evelyn smiled, reading their lips easily enough, and signed teasingly, "Stop talking about me like I'm not here." Julian laughed. "Busted." Naomi giggled too. "She's sharper than both of us combined." As the night wore on, Evelyn excused herself for rest, leaving the two of them alone in the living room. A storm murmured faintly outside. Julian poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to her. "I owe you something," he said softly. Naomi blinked. "For what?" "For giving her back her joy." "She always had it," Naomi said quickly. "It just needed to be seen." Julian studied her quietly. "You remind me of her. Strong. Gentle. But lonely." Naomi froze. "You don't know me." "You're right." "I don't," he said. "But I want to." Something in his tone, steady, unguarded, made her chest ache. She turned away. "Don't." "Why?" "Because people like me don't get to want things like that." Julian frowned. "People like you?" Naomi looked down at her hands. "I grew up working 3 jobs before I was 20. I've been invisible my whole life. You live in a world where people notice everything: status, clothes, background. I'm a waitress." She gestured vaguely, "you." He said nothing at first, only the faint ticking of a clock filling the silence. Then, softly, "You think that matters to me?" "It should." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "It doesn't." Naomi's breath caught. For a moment, neither moved. Then Evelyn's voice drifted faintly from the hall, an unexpected, broken call. Julian rushed toward it, Naomi close behind. They found Evelyn on the floor near the piano, one hand gripping the bench. She wasn't hurt, just shaken. Her eyes glistened as she looked up at the instrument. Julian knelt beside her. "Mom, are you okay?" She nodded weakly, signing, "I thought I could play again. I felt the vibrations. I thought maybe I could remember the sound." Naomi crouched beside her, tears stinging her eyes. Without a word, she placed Evelyn's hands back on the keys, pressing one gently. The note thrummed through the air, soft but steady. Evelyn closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Naomi guided her hands, one note at a time, until a faint, trembling melody filled the room. Julian stood there, watching, his throat tight, his mother's tears falling freely, Naomi's hands trembling but sure. It was as if something holy had unfolded in front of him. When the song faded, Evelyn looked up at Naomi and signed, "You brought the music back." Naomi smiled through her tears. "No, you never lost it." Julian didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was low, thick with emotion. "You don't just heal her, Naomi. You heal everything around you." Naomi blinked hard, trying to steady herself. "I'm not a healer, Julian. I just care. That's what makes it powerful," he whispered. Their eyes met. It was no longer a quiet admiration, it was something raw, unspoken, dangerous. Evelyn, watching silently from the piano bench, smiled faintly to herself. She signed something soft, almost playful. "Sometimes, love sneaks in while you're trying to save someone else." Naomi blushed deeply. "I should get going." Julian didn't stop her this time, but as she reached the door, he said softly, "You don't have to keep running, you know." She turned halfway, raincoat in her hands. "I'm not running." He smiled sadly. "Then why do you look so scared?" Naomi didn't answer. She just left, her heart thundering in her chest. That night, as she walked home under the streetlights, Naomi thought of the piano, of Evelyn's trembling fingers, of Julian's voice saying, "You heal everything around you." And for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't meant to stay invisible forever. The following week felt like a blur of quiet miracles. Evelyn's health stabilized, and her laughter filled the house like sunlight. Every afternoon, Naomi would arrive, sometimes to sign with her, sometimes just to listen. What had started as a simple favor had become a ritual, one that neither woman could bear to miss. Julian often joined them, but he mostly lingered in the background, observing, smiling faintly when Naomi teased his mother or when Evelyn's hands moved with new confidence. It was on one of those golden afternoons that everything shifted. Evelyn had insisted on baking, despite Julian's protests. "We have staff for that," he signed exasperatedly. Evelyn smirked and signed back, "Staff doesn't taste like memory." Naomi laughed at their exchange, rolling up her sleeves to help. Soon, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and vanilla. Naomi and Evelyn worked side by side, signing and giggling as they mixed ingredients, while Julian watched helplessly from the corner. "You look terrified," Naomi teased him. "I'm just trying to figure out how this became my house again," Julian said dryly. "It hasn't smelled like this since. I don't even remember when." "Then it's about time," Naomi said softly. "Homes should smell like life." He smiled at that, the kind of smile that wasn't practiced or polite, just real. As they worked, Evelyn suddenly signed, "Tell me about your grandmother." Naomi froze, her hand halfway to the flour jar. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Julian noticed the shift in her expression. Naomi swallowed hard. "She was the one who taught me to sign," she said quietly. "She lost her hearing after a fever when I was little. My parents were gone, so she raised me." Evelyn's eyes softened. "You loved her deeply." "I did." Naomi's voice broke slightly. "She was my whole world. She used to tell me silence wasn't something to fear, it was something to listen to. But when she passed, I couldn't stand it anymore. I stopped signing. I stopped remembering." Evelyn reached for her hand. "And yet you remembered when I needed you." Naomi smiled through tears. "Maybe she sent me to you." Julian looked down, hiding the emotion in his eyes. "I think she did," he murmured. The kitchen fell into a comfortable hush, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the oven. Naomi began humming softly, a tune her grandmother used to hum while cooking. Evelyn watched her lips, recognizing the rhythm through vibration, and her face lit up. "That song," she signed. "I used to play it." Julian's brow furrowed. "You played it on the piano," he realized, his voice low with wonder. Evelyn nodded, tears welling up. Naomi reached across the counter, squeezing her hand gently. "Maybe we can play it again, together." Evelyn smiled through her tears. "Maybe we already are." Later that evening, when Evelyn went to rest, Naomi lingered by the garden. The twilight air was cool, perfumed with lilac and earth. Julian stepped out quietly, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, taking one. "Never can when she's happy," he said. "It feels rare. Precious." They stood in silence for a while, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Naomi's eyes drifted toward the sky. "You know, when I was little, I used to wish I'd grow up somewhere like this." He smiled faintly. "It's not as perfect as it looks." "I know," she said, turning to him. "You can have everything and still feel like you have nothing." Julian looked at her for a long time. "That's exactly how it feels." Their eyes met, steady, unguarded. The world around them seemed to still. Naomi looked away first, her chest tight. "You should go in. It's cold." He didn't move. "Naomi," he said quietly. She turned slightly. "Yes? Why do you keep running from me?" Her breath caught. "I'm not." "You are. Every time we get close, you shut down." "Why?" She swallowed hard. "Because I can't afford to hope, Julian. People like me don't get to live in stories like this. We serve tables for people who do." He took a slow step closer. "You think love cares about that?" "Love doesn't pay rent," she whispered, trembling. He smiled sadly. "No. But it can make you forget the noise for a while." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. When you grow up with nothing, even kindness feels dangerous. You start wondering when it'll be taken away." Julian's voice softened. "Then let me prove it won't be." Her tears spilled over. "You can't promise that." He hesitated, then reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek. "No," he said gently. "But I can try." Something in his tone broke her defenses. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. The air between them was warm, electric, fragile. He didn't kiss her, not yet. He just stood there, hands trembling, their breath mingling in the cool night. Naomi whispered, "You scare me, Julian." He smiled faintly. "Good. Because you scare me too." They laughed softly through the tears, the sound carried by the wind. It wasn't a confession, but it was something more, something honest, pure. The next morning, Evelyn teased them relentlessly over breakfast, signing with exaggerated amusement, "The air feels different today. Smells like secrets." Naomi blushed crimson while Julian coughed awkwardly into his coffee. "Mother," he mouthed sternly. Evelyn laughed silently, clapping her hands together. "Don't look at me. I've been deaf a long time, but I'm not blind." Naomi buried her face in her hands. "You're terrible," she said, laughing. "I'm happy," Evelyn signed. "Don't ruin it with modesty." Julian chuckled, glancing at Naomi. "You're never going to live this down." "I noticed," she said dryly. But when she looked at him, really looked, she didn't feel the same fear as before. She felt something else, peace. Safety. The feeling that maybe, after all this time, she was allowed to exist in someone's light. That afternoon, while Evelyn napped, Naomi and Julian sat in the sunroom, books open but unread. Naomi broke the silence first. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" He closed his book, eyes meeting hers. "Every day. And I stop. Because I'm afraid if I do, I'll lose this calm, this you." She smiled faintly. "You make it sound like I'm a dream." He leaned closer, voice low. "You feel like one." Her pulse raced. "Julian." "I'm not asking for anything," he interrupted softly. "Just let me care about you. Without rules. Without fear." Naomi's heart swelled with an emotion she couldn't name. She nodded once, whispering, "Okay." And that night, as the rain began to fall again outside, Naomi realized something profound. Silence wasn't emptiness anymore. It was full of heartbeat, laughter, memory, and something that felt dangerously like love. It happened on a Friday, the kind of day that began perfectly, only to unravel without warning. Naomi arrived at the Moreau mansion with a basket of jasmine tea and a quiet smile, humming as she entered. Evelyn greeted her warmly as always, signing, "You look happy." Naomi blushed. "Maybe I am." But the peace that had filled the house for weeks was fragile, waiting for a single crack. And that crack came in the form of a woman named Vanessa Leclerc. Vanessa was a socialite, elegant, sharp, and perfectly aware of her power. She'd been Julian's business partner in several ventures, and once, rumor had it, something more. She arrived unannounced, her heels clicking like punctuation marks on the marble floor. "Julian," she purred as he appeared at the top of the staircase. "You missed lunch." "Again?" Naomi froze mid-step, clutching Evelyn's tea tray. The way Vanessa said his name, familiar, possessive, sent a quiet sting through her chest. Julian's expression tightened. "Vanessa, this isn't a good time." "Oh, come on." She flashed a smile at Naomi, her gaze lingering a little too long on the waitress's plain dress. "And who's this?" "A new staff member." Before Julian could answer, Evelyn signed sharply, "Guest." "Friend." Vanessa blinked. "Oh. I see." Her tone made it clear she didn't. Naomi's cheeks flashed as she placed the tray on the table. "I'll bring more tea." She turned quickly, trying to escape the sudden weight in the room. "Naomi," Julian started, but she was already gone. In the kitchen, Naomi pressed a trembling hand to her chest. It wasn't jealousy, she told herself, it was clarity. A reminder that this world wasn't hers. Whatever she had imagined, whatever warmth she thought existed between her and Julian, was nothing but borrowed air. The rest of the afternoon passed in stilted silence. Vanessa stayed longer than anyone wanted. She followed Julian to his study, laughter echoing through the hall. Naomi caught snippets: expansion deal, image matters, don't get distracted. The last phrase stung like a slap. When Naomi went to leave that evening, Julian met her at the door. "Naomi, wait." She turned, forcing a smile. "It's late, Julian. You should get back to your guests." "There's nothing between me and Vanessa." She shook her head. "You don't owe me an explanation." "Yes, I do," he said firmly. "Because I care about what you think." Her voice cracked. "Then maybe you shouldn't." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means this," she said, motioning around the room. "This house, this life, it's not mine. I was never supposed to belong here. I'm your mother's companion, Julian. Nothing more." He stepped closer, his voice low but urgent. "You think that's all I see when I look at you?" Naomi's throat tightened. "It's all I can afford to believe." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't make this harder." "Naomi." "I said don't." Her voice cracked like glass, and the sound startled them both. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with confusion. She looked between them, signing, "What happened?" Naomi forced a smile, tears already welling. "Nothing, Mrs. Moreau. I should go." Evelyn stepped forward, but Naomi backed away. "Thank you for everything," she said softly. "You've given me more kindness than I deserve." Julian tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Naomi turned and walked out, the slam of the heavy door echoing through the marble halls like a gunshot. Rain began to fall as she stepped outside. Not a storm this time, just soft, steady rain, the kind that carried memories. She walked aimlessly through the city, her mind replaying every smile, every word, every unspoken moment. She reached the old diner she used to work at years ago, its flickering neon sign reflecting off the puddles. She sat inside, ordered coffee she couldn't taste, and stared out the window. "You were foolish, Naomi," she whispered. "You started to believe you belonged somewhere." Back at the mansion, Julian sat in his office, staring at the untouched documents on his desk. Evelyn entered quietly, watching her son in silence before signing, "You let her go." Julian looked up, his face pale. "I didn't mean to." "Then why is she gone?" He rubbed his face, his voice rough. "Because I didn't stop her in time. Because I let someone like Vanessa remind her she's not one of us." Evelyn frowned. "And do you believe that?" He hesitated. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Evelyn walked closer, her expression fierce. "Then listen to me, Julian. That girl carries more grace in her silence than half this city does in its noise. She doesn't need your pity. She needs your courage." Julian looked up sharply. "Courage?" "To love her anyway." The word struck him like lightning. He looked toward the door Naomi had left through hours ago, his heartbeat pounding in his chest. Meanwhile, Naomi sat in her small apartment, soaked clothes still clinging to her skin. The silence was unbearable. She stared at her grandmother's photo on the nightstand and whispered, "What do I do, Grandma? If I go back, I'll break. If I stay away, I'll still break." Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Julian, she's asking for you. Please." "Mom's not well tonight." Naomi's heart seized. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and ran into the rain. When she arrived, Evelyn was in the music room, trembling, clutching the edge of the piano. Her breathing was shallow. Julian was beside her, helpless. Naomi rushed forward. "It's okay," she said softly, kneeling beside Evelyn, taking her hands. "Breathe with me." Evelyn's panic eased as Naomi began signing slowly, deliberately, "You're safe. You're not alone." Tears streamed down Evelyn's face. She signed back weakly, "You came." "Always," Naomi replied, smiling through tears. Julian watched, chest tight, as his mother finally calmed, resting her head against Naomi's shoulder. For the first time in hours, the house felt alive again. But when Evelyn drifted off to sleep, Naomi stood quietly, turning toward the door. Julian followed her. "Naomi," he said softly. "Don't," she whispered, shaking her head. "Tonight wasn't about us." "I know," he said. "But it could be." Her voice trembled. "You don't get to say that after today." He looked at her, eyes desperate. "Then tell me what to do." Naomi's tears spilled freely now. "Let me go, Julian. Please." He stepped closer, voice breaking. "I can't." "Then you'll only hurt us both." And before he could stop her again, she turned and walked out, this time slower, gentler, but final. Julian stood there long after she left, the silence pressing around him like grief. Evelyn's soft breathing was the only sound in the house. And in that silence, he finally understood what Naomi had tried to teach him all along: sometimes silence wasn't peace. It was the sound of everything that mattered slipping away. Days passed in aching silence. The Moreau mansion felt colder, quieter, like every room was holding its breath. Evelyn moved through it like a ghost, her eyes often drifting toward the door as if expecting Naomi to appear. Julian threw himself into work, attending meetings that meant nothing, signing papers he didn't read. He told himself he was fine, that it was better this way. But every time he caught his reflection, he saw the truth written all over it: he'd let something extraordinary slip away. One morning, as autumn began to settle over the city, Julian walked into Evelyn's room with her breakfast. She was sitting by the window, her hand still, her gaze distant. "Mom," he said softly. She turned, her face pale but calm. She signed slowly, deliberately, "You look empty." He gave a tired smile. "I am." Evelyn nodded, then pointed toward the small piano in the corner. "Play for me." He hesitated. "It's been years." "Then start again." He sat, running his fingers across the keys, the dust rising in thin wisps. He began to play the tune Naomi had hummed, the lullaby from the kitchen that day, the one Evelyn recognized from long ago. His hands shook at first, but the melody grew stronger. Evelyn smiled faintly. When he finished, she signed, "Do you know why I love that song?" He shook his head. "Because it's about two people who find each other in silence. And every time one stops listening, the music dies." Julian stared at her, emotion tightening his throat. "You think the music's dead?" She signed slowly, "Not yet. But only if you listen." That night, Julian couldn't sleep. He stood by the window of his office, staring out at the rain-soaked city. Every drop that hit the glass sounded like her name. "Naomi." He closed his eyes, whispering to the empty room, "You said love doesn't pay rent. But it's the only thing I can't stop spending." Finally, he made a choice. He grabbed his coat, left the mansion, and drove into the city. Naomi, meanwhile, had returned to her old life at the cafe. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the smell of coffee and detergent mixing in the air. It felt smaller than before, too small for everything she'd felt, too small for everything she'd lost. She was wiping a table when her coworker, Tasha, nudged her. "You've been quiet lately." "Trouble?" Naomi forced a smile. "Just thinking too much." Tasha arched an eyebrow. "About the rich guy?" Naomi laughed weakly. "Was it that obvious?" "Girl, you glowed. Like Disney princess level glowed. Now you just look like someone unplugged you." Naomi sighed. "It was never going to work." Tasha shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe you just left before it had the chance to." Naomi looked down, fingers tightening on the rag. "I was scared, Tasha. It's easier to walk away than wait for someone to remind you you're not enough." Tasha frowned. You ever think maybe that's not what he would have done? Naomi hesitated. For the first time, she didn't have an answer. That evening, the cafe door opened, and in walked Julian. The world seemed to stop. Naomi froze behind the counter, her breath catching. He looked the same, but older somehow, his eyes carrying weeks of sleepless nights. "Julian," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Hi." Tasha shot Naomi a wide-eyed look and quickly disappeared into the kitchen. Naomi straightened her apron, trying to find her voice. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he said. "But I had to be." She crossed her arms, though her hands were trembling. "What do you want?" Julian took a slow breath. "To tell you something before I lose my chance." "Julian." "No, just listen." He stepped closer, his voice low, trembling but steady. "You were right. I let my world make you feel small. I let someone else's shadow fall between us. I should have stopped her, should have told you what you mean to me before it was too late." Naomi swallowed hard. "Julian, please don't. I love you." The words landed between them like a fragile miracle. Naomi's eyes widened, her lips parting, but no sound came out. He continued, voice breaking. "I love you, Naomi. Not because you were kind to my mother, not because you made this house feel like home again. I love you because when you're near, I can finally hear myself think. Because you make silence feel like music." Naomi's tears fell freely now. "You shouldn't say that." "Why not?" he asked gently. "Because it hurts," she whispered. "Because I want to believe you, but I don't know how." He stepped closer. "Then let me teach you." She shook her head, tears streaming. "Julian, you don't know what it's like to love someone when the world tells you you shouldn't. To always wonder if the look in their eyes is pity or love." Julian's voice was soft but fierce. "Then look again. And tell me what you see." Naomi hesitated. His eyes were steady, raw, pleading. There was no pity there, only truth. "I see," her voice trembled. "I see a man who doesn't give up easily." "Then don't make me start now." Her laugh broke through her tears. "You're impossible." "Good," he said, smiling faintly. "Because I'm not leaving without an answer." Naomi's breath hitched. The cafe was silent except for the low hum of the lights. Her heart raced. "You really love me?" "With everything I am." She looked away, whispering, "You're going to regret it." Julian shook his head. "No. The only thing I regret is waiting this long to tell you." The silence stretched, fragile, breathless. Then Naomi whispered, "Say it again." He stepped closer, voice a whisper against the hum of the cafe. "I love you, Naomi." She closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. Then maybe she took a trembling breath. "Maybe I don't have to keep running." Julian reached out, gently taking her hand. "Then don't." For a long moment, they just stood there, hands intertwined, hearts exposed, two people finally listening to what silence had been trying to say all along. Later that night, Julian drove her back to the mansion. Evelyn was waiting by the window. When she saw Naomi step out of the car, her face lit up. She signed furiously, "You came back." Naomi laughed through tears. "I missed you." Evelyn reached for her, pulling her into a silent, tearful hug. Then she looked at her son and signed, "You finally listened." Julian smiled faintly. "I did." Naomi looked between them, laughter and tears mingling in her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt home. That night, after Evelyn went to bed, Julian and Naomi stood in the garden under a canopy of stars. He turned to her. "You know, I meant what I said. I don't care what anyone thinks." Naomi smiled softly. "Maybe I do. But for the first time, I think I care more about what you think." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Then we'll figure the rest out, together. She nodded, resting her head against his chest. For once, silence didn't feel empty. It felt like everything she'd ever needed. Morning light spilled through the Morrow mansion like gold poured across marble. For the first time in months, it didn't feel cold. The house hummed softly, coffee brewing, laughter echoing faintly from the garden, the rustle of wind against the curtains. Naomi woke in the guest room, sunlight warming her face. She stretched, smiling at the unfamiliar but comforting feeling of peace. Evelyn was already awake, sitting by the piano, her fingers lightly tracing the keys. She looked up as Naomi entered and signed, "I had a dream you never left." Naomi smiled. "Maybe I didn't. Maybe I just needed to find my way back." Evelyn chuckled silently, her eyes shimmering. "Julian's been pacing since sunrise." Naomi laughed softly. "He's terrible at pretending not to worry." "He gets that from me," Evelyn signed proudly. Naomi sat beside her, watching as the older woman began to play a slow, gentle melody, the same song Naomi had hummed weeks before. Her fingers hesitated at first, then grew confident, fluid, alive. Naomi joined her, not with words, but with signs, letting the music and the movement speak for both of them. Julian appeared in the doorway, pausing at the sight before him. His mother, radiant and alive. Naomi, smiling with unguarded joy. For the first time, everything felt right. He stood there for a long moment, simply watching, letting the beauty of it settle in his chest. When they finished, Evelyn turned to them both and signed, "Promise me something." Naomi nodded. "Anything. Don't let silence win again." Julian's throat tightened. "We won't." Evelyn smiled, satisfied, and turned back to the piano, playing once more. Later that day, Julian and Naomi took a walk through the city, the same streets where they had first collided, him in his perfect suit, her in her worn apron. Only this time, there was no distance between them. The same people who had once ignored her now glanced curiously at the pair, his hand gently resting at the small of her back, her laughter floating through the air. They stopped by the cafe where she used to work. Naomi smiled as Tasha rushed over, eyes wide. "Girl. So it was him." Naomi laughed. "Yes, it was." Tasha grinned. "I told you rich boy wasn't done with you. You gonna come back to work or what?" Julian raised an eyebrow playfully. "You're trying to steal my favorite person." Tasha laughed. "If I could afford her, I would." Naomi rolled her eyes. "You're impossible." Julian smirked. "You keep saying that like it's an insult." Tasha grinned and winked. "You two better not forget us when you're all fancy and in love." Naomi blushed, but her smile didn't fade. For the first time, the idea of being seen, truly seen, didn't scare her anymore. That evening, back at the mansion, Julian found Naomi in the garden. The air was soft, scented with jasmine and rain. She was sitting on the stone bench, sketching something in a small notebook. "What are you drawing?" he asked, sitting beside her. She turned the sketchbook around. It was a rough drawing of two hands, one signing, the other reaching back. Below it, she had written, "Love speaks every language." Julian smiled. "That's beautiful." Naomi shrugged shyly. "It's just a thought." He studied her face for a long moment, then said quietly, "Naomi, I don't want this to just be a thought. Or a chapter. I want it to be everything." Her heart stuttered. "Julian?" He took her hand. "I've spent most of my life building things that didn't last, companies, walls, reputations. But what you've given me, what you gave my mother, it's the first thing I've ever wanted to keep." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't have to say this." "I do," he interrupted softly. "Because I've already lost you once. I won't let silence take you from me again." Naomi's voice broke. "And what if people talk?" "Then let them," he said firmly. "They'll never understand what we found in the quiet." For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Then she smiled through her tears, whispering, "You always say the right thing." He chuckled. "No. I just finally learned to listen." He leaned forward then, slowly, giving her time to pull away. But she didn't. Their lips met softly at first, gentle, searching, then deepened, as if both of them had been holding that moment in for a lifetime. The world around them faded, replaced by warmth, the rhythm of heartbeats, and the whisper of wind through the trees. When they finally pulled apart, Naomi laughed softly. "You know what my grandmother used to say?" Julian smiled. "What?" "She said love doesn't need to be loud to be real." He brushed her cheek tenderly. "Then I guess we're the quiet kind." Naomi smiled. "The best kind." Weeks later, the mansion became a different place entirely. Evelyn's health continued to improve. She and Naomi now taught sign language workshops together for hearing-impaired children. Julian attended every class, sometimes pretending to help but mostly watching Naomi with quiet pride. The press eventually caught wind of their story, the billionaire CEO and the deaf mother's interpreter who changed everything. There was noise, of course, judgment from those who couldn't see past appearances. But for once, Julian didn't care. He had his mother's laughter back, his peace, and a love that had rewritten the meaning of silence. Naomi, on her part, still worked at the cafe occasionally, not because she had to, but because she liked remembering where she came from. She never wanted to forget the girl who once believed love wasn't for her. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset from the garden, Naomi turned to Julian and asked, "Do you ever think about how strange it all was? How everything started with a tray of coffee and a few signs?" Julian smiled. "Strange? Maybe. But I think it was fate pretending to be clumsy." Naomi laughed. "I like that." He reached for her hand. "So, tell me something, Naomi. Do you still believe people like you don't get stories like this?" She looked up at him, eyes shining. "I think people like me create them." Julian smiled, pressing his forehead gently to hers. "Then let's keep writing." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn appeared at the doorway, signing with a knowing smile, "The music never dies if you keep listening." Naomi smiled back, signing, "I hear it, Mrs. Moreau." And for the first time in her life, Naomi believed it. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was full of love, laughter, and the quiet promise that she was exactly where she was meant to be.